Hey everyone, Rick here, and welcome to my top 10 games of 2018. Personally, a year that I feel was absolutely fantastic for not only board games, but for the tabletop hobby in general. There are those who may say 2018 was a lackluster year. Folks, ignore the naysayers. There are some truly incredible games that came out last year. In fact, some of these games that I'm going to be talking about today are in my top games of all time. So with this being a new year, I did want to kind of try something new. So I'm going to be doing a couple of these lists, starting with this one and then doing a top 100 games of all time, broken down 10 games per video for a 10 video series. But let's get this started. 10 games boiled down from 2018 that I found to be truly impressive. Let's get started with number 10, Patchwork Express. Now some have asked, some have said, did Patchwork need an Express version? Did Patchwork need a more streamlined version? Apparently it was a simple enough game as is. I can't answer that because this was actually my foray into Patchwork. So think of this as someone who played Patchwork for the first time. I thought this would be a good jump-in point. I'd give it a try, and folks, I fell in love with it. First of all, Uwe Rosenberg is one of my favorite designers of all time. He's designed some of my absolute favorite games. He's designed some other of these kind of Tetris-shaped puzzle piece games like Cottage Garden, which is fantastic. In Patchwork Express, you are purchasing patches to make a quilt. It is a two-player only game, you and your opponent purchasing these patches. On your board, it's gridded. Wherever you put these Tetris-shaped pieces is where they're going to stay, so you have some planning to do. Adorable little buttons as currency. It is just a fantastic looking game. By the end of the game, it's just neat to see what your opponent's quilt turned out to be versus what yours was. It has a pretty interesting scoring track where the first person to reach certain milestones will get extra buttons they can use to spend on future patches. Patchwork Express, light, fun, friendly, fast, everything you want in a two-player game, Patchwork Express. Number 9, my 9th favorite game of 2018, Monster Crunch, the breakfast cereal battle game. Number 1, Monster Crunch is a shedding game. If you're familiar with shedding games, it's where you have cards and you want to get rid of them. It's kind of a ladder climbing, step climbing game where everyone has the same deck of cards, they're numbered, and you want to start low and then go high. So for example, I'll play a 1. Next person can play equal to what I played or greater. So they may play a 1 or a 2. So I'll play a 1, they'll play a 1, someone will play a 2, someone will play a 6. A 6? What are you doing? Maybe that's all they had. Maybe they have some ulterior motives. But there's no harm in doing that because then we have these milk tokens. Let's say I still had a 1, a 2, and a 3. You want to get rid of your cards, not just in the round, not just in this particular hand, but in the round, because if you're left with any cards at the end of the round, they're not going to score you points. So it's actually a detriment to you. So use these milk tokens to combine cards. You can use milk tokens to combine 2 cards of one number or cards 1 up from another. So I could take 2 milk tokens, combine that 1, 2, and a 3. That makes 6. There's a legal play. He played a 6. Now I did, and I just got rid of 3 cards in the process. The components are fantastic. I actually only know a few of these breakfast mascots. Count Chocula, obviously, maybe Boo Berry. The artwork is great, family-friendly, fun. Everyone has their own player powers as well, so everyone has some unique things that only they can do. The box looks like a breakfast cereal box. I've played this with non-gamers who have fallen in love with it. This game is just a success as a gateway game into the hobby. Fast, fun. You're going to be hearing a lot about that. Monster Crunch, the breakfast cereal battle game, my number 9 of 2018. Let's move on to number 8. My 8th favorite game of last year is Haven. Haven is also actually a 2-player only game. Art is Gorgeous by Ryan Lockett of Red Raven Games. This game, I've discovered recently that I am truly enjoying area control games. This takes that and puts just a really interesting twist on how you're going to be controlling these areas. There's going to be two main parts of the board you're going to be focused on. The actual battle part and then the board that shows where you control majorities. With the battle portion, you're going to be playing cards in 3 different areas, and eventually one or more of those areas is going to score. You'll have spaces on the board that'll tell you where the next scoring is going to take place, so you have some control over it. In fact, there's going to be 3 decks of cards that you can draw from. You know, in a typical turn, there's going to be a draw phase. You can draw your cards from one pile or mix and match from different piles. One pile is going to give you player powers. So it's going to be a situation where maybe I want more of those so I can do special things. Another pile is going to be cards that'll help you time, give you some control over when these different categories are going to score. And the third and final deck is probably the most important. That's the cards that you'll be able to play to try to win one of these 3 areas. There's actually 2 values on each of those cards, a lore value and a military value. You want the higher military value if you want control of certain areas on the board, but you want a higher lore value because each of those 3 areas has a lore token on it with a value, and the higher lore value wins. The theme of this game is kind of Avatar-ish. There's an industrial powerhouse moving into the forest, and then one side plays them, the other side plays the nature side itself, trying to, you know, prevent the takeover of their wilderness. It is a simple, streamlined game, 2 players. It is fantastic. Every time I've played it, it has been fascinating how it turns out. Awesome, awesome game. That is Haven, my number 8 of 2018. Let's move on to number 7, folks. Number 7, Reef. Good grief. Emerson Matsuuchi's done it again. Century, Spice Road, Golem Edition, whichever one, is one of my all-time favorite games from the simplicity. Turns take 2 seconds, but there's so much more to the game. I also love Majesty for the Realm, Spectrops, but now Reef. You want a game where you can bring in anyone. Gamers, non-gamers, young, old. You're looking at it right here. Because in Reef, there's one of 2 things you can do on a turn. Take a card or play a card. Cards have a top and a bottom. The top will show you which pieces you grab. The bottom is a pattern. If out on your board that pattern exists, you can score that pattern. The pieces are beautiful, chunky, colorful pieces. You're building a coral reef. You have to really plan ahead, gathering these pieces, playing cards, not only for more pieces, but to score these patterns. And you kind of want to look ahead to see, okay, you know, I want to get this pattern, but actually this pattern kind of fits in with that pattern over here, so I wonder if there's a way that I could chain those somehow. Reef is fast. Turns are like this. Rules light. I think it's like 4 pages. It is simply phenomenal. My number 7 of 2018, Reef. Fantastic game, leading us into number 6. This is the last game of the bottom half of the list. Number 6 of 2018 is Heroes of Dominaria. This game is simply awesome. Why? First of all, it is Magic the Gathering themed. It's really Magic the Gathering themed in name alone. Name of the resources, the things you can build, the planeswalkers, which are just your people in the game. Typically, I mean, you can have a favorite planeswalker if you do play Magic the Gathering. It really doesn't have any bearing on the gameplay. There aren't special powers for the different planeswalkers. It's really just a fancy way of saying, hey, pick your favorite color. What I love about this game is it does exactly what I love to do in games, which is gather resources and spend those resources to build things and to do things. The player boards are very unique in that all the building components that you'll eventually be able to put out there are all placed on your board. Every time you build one of those pieces, it'll reveal something. Typically, all of them will have victory points, but some will give you extra things, extra quest cards, extra resources, extra movement. Because this game starts really slow. You have one person for each person you have, you only have one space you can move. There's basically 3 things you can do on a turn. Gather resources from a space you're in. You can only do that once per turn no matter what. Move a space, and use the resources you've already gathered to purchase and build things. You can purchase more people. More people means more move actions. You can purchase things that'll give you more mana tokens, which are the resources necessary to build other things. You can fight cabals. You can gather quest cards, because the interesting way that it lays out the resources is there's a deck of cards. When you flip the top card, it'll tell you, okay, all green spaces get another resource token. But some of those cards also say, hey, in this specific space, also put an artifact token, or put a cabal. Cabals, you need mana to fight them. Otherwise, you can't gather resources from that area. Artifacts will give you either an instant gratification or an ability you can use for the rest of the game. And it's all worth victory points. So at the end of the game, add up all the victory points from things you've built, cabals you've defeated, artifact cards you've gathered, and quest cards you've accomplished. Winner is the highest victory point total. I love it. Heroes of Dominaria, my number 6 of 2018. We're moving to the top 5, folks. My 5 favorite games of 2018. Number 5. Pandemic Fall of Rome. Now, this is actually my first foray into Pandemic. Pandemic is, you know, a tried and true cooperative board game that your friends and neighbors have trusted for years. And recently they've been coming out with these different themed variants on the tried and true Pandemic system, each one bringing something new into the fold. I do own Rising Tide, but I've never gotten it to the table, and I love Defenders of the Realm, which I know a lot of people compare this to only because you're battling cooperatively different things. In this case, Gladiator is my favorite movie of all time. So, Pandemic Fall of Rome, barbarians are what's invading now. So instead of a virus, like in base Pandemic, in Fall of Rome, you're battling against barbarians. It's so awesome that you have different barbarian supplies, and as they invade, they have a specific route that they're going to use. Not only that, but like in basic Pandemic, if you get too many barbarians in a spot, in this case, that city is sacked. One of the ways you can lose is if the Rome decline track falls to the bottom. And every time a city is sacked by barbarians, you reduce that decline marker. Additionally, you have event cards, which can help you in one of 2 ways. One, the top of the card is something great. The bottom of the card, if you choose to use that, is even better, but you take a little decline in order to use that better ability. Little corruption in Rome for the greater good. I'm not the biggest cooperative fan. Why? Because I feel a lot of the time it suffers from an alpha gamer perspective. If someone has played this game already and they're playing with people who aren't as experienced, sometimes you'll tend to get those situations where, oh, you know, I've played this before, I see what you're doing, I know that that doesn't turn out well. You don't want to say that. Like, on one hand, you want to work together cooperatively, you want to help out, but on the other hand, you know, you want them to be able to do their own thing. You don't want to take over the game, but still, the mechanics in this game make up for any alpha gamer problem that I might have with it. It is so much fun when you're battling, instead of against a virus, you're battling with your legionnaires against the barbarians, and there are dice rolls. So some people may not like that, luck of the roll, but it makes for an exciting game. And I just love it. That's Pandemic Fall of Rome, my number 5 of 2018. Let's move on to number 4. This game is just absolutely thrilling. This is The King's Guild. Now, folks, this was a game that I had only heard about recently. Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower was going off on how much of a surprise this was. It was actually on Kickstarter. I did not know about it back then, but now that it is released at retail, I encourage you to give this a look. Why? Because if you know Splendor, Splendor, the game where you are collecting gems to spend those gems to buy these cards, in this game, similar situation. Like I mentioned previously, I love just the basic Euro game idea of collecting resources and spending them. This game gives you multiple outlets to spend different resources. So you have several different kinds of resources. Some are not available to you unless you unlock extra things. So, for example, you have a guild, King's Guild, right? And you have a board that's gridded. You are collecting resources, and you can only store a finite amount of them. You use this combination of resources to purchase these quest cards. The quest cards, by purchasing them, give you gold. You can then spend the gold to purchase new rooms for your guild or more people to fill out your rooms with. The people give you special abilities. The rooms give you special abilities. There's just an awesome idea of gathering these resources, spending them, completing quests. It's just fantastic. Simple, but there's a lot to it. The King's Guild, my number 4 of 2018, which means we are up to number 3. Folks, if you don't look up after this is over any of these games, I implore you to please check out Gizmos. Gizmos, my number 3 of the year, is also one of my favorite games of all time. Why? Engine building. Worker placement is probably my favorite mechanism of all time in board games, but engine building is easily my second favorite. In Gizmos, you have this really cool marble dispenser. And with that dispenser, it'll have different colored marbles, which you will pick from, and then you'll have a pool of these different colored marbles, which you will spend to purchase these cards called Gizmos. Each card is going to give you a permanent ability for the rest of the game. It might start out slow. You'll be picking marbles, maybe doing something else, getting these gizmos, but after a few turns, you have an engine going, because now, with all the cards you've acquired, picking one yellow marble now activates this, and this. I mean, the endorphins in your brain are just going crazy. Your neurons and electrons are firing all over the place. It's an embarrassment of riches. You're getting all this stuff, spending it. It takes all my favorite things about games, acquiring resources, spending them, but the combos, the cards that you pick from are chaining off of each other and getting you more and more stuff. It is fantastic if you just want a feel-good game that's quick. Again, a lot of so I didn't go over exactly how long turns take in some of these games, but in games like Reef and Gizmos, turns are lightning fast. Hardly any downtime. My number 3 of the year, one of my favorite games of all time, that's Gizmos. Folks, we are at the top 2 games of all time. I mean, not of all time, of this year. But let me tell you this. They are probably going to be pretty high up on my top list of all time. Number 2 of 2018, Crown of Amara. Do you like rondels? I honestly wasn't sure that I was that big of a fan of rondels. You know, the idea of a circular track where wherever you go, whatever you land on, that's what you'll get. Crown of Amara takes the idea of a rondel, duplicates it, and comes up with a fantastic system. Now, this may be hard to find in the United States. I don't think there's a US publisher that has this right now. As soon as I saw it and was fascinated by it, I had to order it directly from Germany. It's a German US instruction copy, thankfully. But folks, 2 rondels. One is going to be where you get all your resources. The other rondel is going to be where you spend those resources to get things. There's one victory point track, but you have 2 markers on it. It takes that idea of whatever you scored lowest in of the 2, that is your final score. So it's a balancing act. The mechanism in this game of how a turn works is so thinky. You have to plan ahead. In this game, you have a player board. It has 3 spots on it, numbered 1, 2, and 3. This game only lasts 6 rounds. You have a deck of 9 cards, identical to everyone else's. You draw the top 3. Playing those 3 cards is going to be 1 round. So, on a turn, you take one of those cards and you put it in one of those areas. Depending on what number you put it, you have 2 counselors, one on one rondel, one on the other, and whatever number space you put that card in, that's how many spaces you're going to move one of your counselors. In addition, the card itself is going to give you something. So you have to think, you know, in future turns, well, I want this guy on the resource track to go there because I'm going to need those resources in addition to the resources on the card that I just got in order to then move that counselor on that rondel there so I can then spend it over here. But folks, beyond that is this truly awesome notion that it's kind of a self-regulating economy where you have these tokens that rotate. So, for example, one of the spaces on the board where you can spend your resources allows you to get some bonus option, bonus item. But let's say you go there and you donate a cloth to the cathedral. Well, that cloth token now rotates. It only took one cloth to get that when you went there, but for the rest of the game, or you know, until someone else goes there, you rotate it. Now it takes 2 cloth to go there. There's 4 different resources, so there's 4 chances to be able to spend low to get what you get there, but eventually that token's going to keep rotating. And there's multiple sections on the board that do that. It is fascinating. You got to keep track of both of your scoring tokens. You got to keep track of both rondels. You have all these options of where you put the cards, because in the end, because when you're down to that final card, you only have 1 space left to put it. So hopefully you thought ahead, that's where you'll want to go. But it is awesome. Crown of Amara is fantastic. It looks good. Components are solid. It is so much fun. Crown of Amara, my number 2 of 2018. And my timer says I have plenty of time to talk to you about my number 1 game of 2018, one of my favorite games of all time. That is Calimala. Now this, before I just lose my mind talking about this game, Calimala it's kind of a cheat because it technically came out in Europe last year, 2017. However, Stronghold Games brought it to the United States, just released it in 2018. So I'm considering it a 2018 release for me personally, Calimala. When I talked about Gizmos and your endorphins just going nuts because you are getting all this stuff, Calimala has like 19 different times it's going to score, and it is real-time scoring. There is a stack of 15 tokens that you are going to put out on a scoring track. So every game is going to score in a different order, because as soon as one of those tokens gets hit, that's what scores. And you got to pay attention to the board to see how quickly the next thing is going to score. But it is so awesome that it is just constantly scoring over and over again. But folks, like I said, I actually am really liking this area control idea. In Calimala, there are so many areas where you can fight for control. It is mind-boggling. The theme of the game is like 17th century Italy, the linen trade, the cloth trade. Now that sounds absolutely fascinating, right? Theme aside, it is awesome. All these different ways that you need to try to get your pieces to have the majority there, to see what's going to score next. This takes one of my favorite mechanism, like I said, worker placement, and turns the dial to 10. Why? Because on the section of the board where you place your workers, you don't just take one action. Each of those spaces is in between 2 actions. So when you put a worker there, you take both actions. Not only that, but in a lot of worker placement games, when you place a worker, that blocks it from anyone else being able to take that action. In Calimala, it's not that way. You can place where anyone else placed. Why? And why might you want to consider that carefully? Because everyone below you gets to take that action again on your turn. So if Joe played there first and then I play on top, I get to take both of those actions, and then whoever below me, Joe then also gets to take those 2 actions again. It is also kind of an embarrassment of riches in that sense. Not only that, but you have secret objectives that'll score for everybody, but cards that only you know for sure will score at the end. So you always want to keep an eye on that area, but you don't want to give it away that's where your secret card may be, because other people might catch on and say, oh, well, I think that area is probably going to be a secret area that scores at the end of the game. All the real-time scoring, all of the worker placement, the area control, I love it. Calimala, my favorite game of 2018, one of my favorite games of all time. Keep an eye on my top 100 list to see where these fall. This is definitely, not to spoil too much, but it's going to be up there, folks. So that is it. I don't know if you can see my top 10 games of 2018. Patchwork Express, Monster Crunch, Haven, Reef, Heroes of Dominaria, Fall of Rome, Pandemic, The King's Guild, Gizmos, Crown of Amara, and Calimala. That's it. That is my top 10 games of 2018. A year that I truly believe is not getting the love it deserves. Some of these games are my favorite games of all time. Please check them out if you want to know more about any of these. The greatest online resource for board gaming of all time, BoardGameGeek.com. Full profiles, forums, images, video reviews of all these games. Take a look at them, please. I implore you. It is awesome. Let's get together sometime and play some of these, huh? That is it. Thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.